Well, I hope you have had a fantastic lunch and lots of coffee because we have 2 more panels to go. It's great to see so many of you here. And well, following this morning's panels, where we have had lots of discussions about retail investors and the geopolitical situation in the world, all sunny, perhaps not. Now we're going to talk about sustainable finance. And we're going to talk about what remains to be done with the E in the ESG, but also what we should do with the S and the G. And, well, I mean, we can conclude that lots remains to be done in the field of sustainable finance. We are approaching the end, possibly, of this version of the Sustainable Finance Action Plan. And, well, we'll discuss then the E, S, and the G in this panel. And as we have heard in previous panel, I mean, this is not just a European topic, a European market. On the contrary, this is a field, an area where we have global competition, but where we can also learn a lot from each other. And while I've been working with sustainable finance since like 2014 or something, well, my knowledge about this field is nothing compared to the knowledge of the panelists here. We're very delighted to have Annemie Rombots, who's the Deputy Chairman of the Financial Services and Markets Authority here in Belgium. We have Florence Bindel, who's the Secretary General of European Issuers, based here in Brussels. We have Håvard Gulbrandsen, who's the Managing Director of KLP Asset Management in Norway. And we have Mette Kornvig, who's Director and Head of Sustainability in Jyske Bank in Denmark. So a good mix of Nordics and Europeans, not to say that the Nordics are not Europeans. If we kick off with the public sector, we normally do that in these kind of panels, as you know, to get kind of the macro perspective of the topic. Annemie, I know that you have worked quite a lot with sustainable finance, not just here in Belgium, but also, of course, at European and international level. As, of course, your colleague Jean-Paul Servais is now the chairman of IOSCO. And if we kind of take stock of where we are today in this round of the panel, and then we continue and discuss kind of what remains to be done, etc., what would you say? I mean, where are we at present on the E, S, and the G? Please, Annemie.
Thank you, Urban. I would like to address that at global, European and national level.
Yeah, absolutely. You're the perfect person to do that. Yes.
I'll try my best. So it's all regulatory framework, or most of regulatory framework starts with disclosure obligations, and that's also true for the sustainable finance regulatory framework. It's all about disclosure, about corporates disclosing sustainability risks and opportunities, and that is the fundamentals, and everything else builds on that. At global level, you recall that since Erkki Liikanen at COP26 in 2021 announced the launch of the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board, it's only been 2 years or even less that the board delivered its first set of standards in June 23. That is impressive. It has been endorsed by IOSCO in July of this year. IOSCO considering it an appropriate global framework for sustainability reporting by companies. And so now the key challenge is having as many jurisdictions as possible adopt the standards. And IOSCO and ISSB have been putting into place a comprehensive capacity building program, helping out preparers, helping out stakeholders, helping out countries to try to understand and implement. So that is what is at stake at global level. 2024 is a major election year, as we have read, so we can only hope we can keep the momentum. Huh? But I think we can say that from a regulatory point of view, this is revolutionary in the given time frame. And what is also exceptional is the dialogue that has taken place between the global level and the European level about interoperability. And I think Florence will talk about it also. These efforts were huge to really make sure that both sets of standards talk with each other as much as possible, which is key for global preparers. So that is where we stand. At European level, of course, what has been achieved is highly ambitious. With the ESRSs having been delivered, the taxonomy entering into force, the delegated acts being imminent, I think the building blocks are falling into place. We started a little bit oddly with the cart in front of the horses, but that is now, I think that the pieces are falling into place. I think we're in a crucial point of time, a crucial moment, because with the building blocks being in place, from now on, we can start working on quality of information and on making the framework really effective. But it's a start. I mean, we have been starting, but we're starting again. I think we can continue climbing the learning curve as far as that is concerned. And then at national level, NCA's national competent authorities, supervisors have been fully or are fully engaged in implementing the framework, and that's a huge job, as it is for issuers, I think. National supervisors are confronted with the complexity of the framework. I think we can say with the lack of alignment of concepts or entry into force, but they also can build upon capacity building initiatives at ESMA level, at EFRAC level, so that is a really good thing. And supervisory action traditionally kicks off with guidance to the sectors under supervision. So I think national authorities have been very busy in communicating, in trying to organize workshops with companies to try to have a common understanding of what is needed. And then real supervisory actions also kicked off, and in my view, more rapidly than would be the case, generally speaking, with other legislations. I mean, they kicked off more rapidly after the entry into force of the legislations. We have been looking at non-financial reporting and at integrating climate risk in financial reporting for some years already. It has been a European common enforcement priority. We see a really steady progression in the quality of the information. But of course, lots remains to be done. SFDR, compliance with SFDR has been screened. And for example, at FSMA level, we did a survey on the way market participants take into account sustainability preferences, preparing for a common supervisory action of next year. So supervision is really kicking off. And as I said, I think in a more rapid pace than would otherwise have been the case, and in a very coordinated way also from ESMA and EIOPA level onwards. So that is, I think, where we stand today. I think the toolkit, the regulatory toolkit, can be considered as, of course, we're going to criticize it, but we can consider it is complete today. And so we can start, I think, working on consolidation and on quality of data. Yeah. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. And I think of course, collaboration, this is really an area where you need, and I think you can find collaboration between the regulators and the industry. I mean, Håvard, I learned this part of the trade while working for an asset manager several years ago. I mean, when we started on the journey to learn more about ESG, and I know that you have in your firm spent quite a lot of time and resources on this, and you may explain also to everyone here who about KLP.
Yeah, so we are an asset manager, managing around 75 billion euros. Global manager, owned by KLP, a pension company, owned by their customers. So that's the background. So we're global, 20,000 investments, 70 countries. We're all over the globe. So we're invested in all the problems in the world, basically. I'll go a little bit back when we started this, 1999. Our customers, owners came to KLP and said, hang on, that was the hospitals. We get a lot of sick people due to tobacco in here. And they said that, why are you investing in tobacco? We don't want that return. So I'm just telling you that because there's a reason why we started with the ESG into the investment side. So I think that's maybe some of the first international investors that started with the ESG side, which is a negative screening. And they said, okay, fine, tobacco, it's very, very good money, but we don't want to return from it. And that's where it kind of evolved from that. And the next one, the things that happened was cluster bombs from, and then the Norwegian oil fund started with an ethical committee, and they found out that there are certain areas that we don't want return from. So that's kind of the starting point, and a lot has happened since then. There's still a negative screening. There are things that we do not invest in, not because we think that we can change the tobacco companies. It's Philip Morris is still doing quite well, selling tobacco to the third world. So that's not the intention, but there are some areas that they don't want to return from, which is quite common in Norway now. It's also common in the Nordic areas and in other parts of the world. The other thing is that in 2003 we joined the UN Global Compact. So there are some areas that we try to change some companies, their behavior. And if they do not change, then we might divest in the last instance. So that's kind of a little bit where it started nearly 25 years ago. Now we engage with companies, we try to change them, so that's another thing. And we also have certain funds that are much smaller and are so-called ESG funds. We also have some investment in directed, for instance, the new type of technology. So that's where we are now after 25 years. We have a range of funds that do the negative screening, but we also have a range of funds that are much smaller. Also, Article 9. If you heard about Article 9, are you all familiar with Article 6, 8, 9, and 10? Yeah. Do you know where did that come from?
Different shades of grey. You may explain it briefly.
So 6 is like very little ESG. 8 is quite a lot of ESG, where you take that into account. And 9 is only sustainable investments. 10 is just a reporting something. So it's very strange. But anyway. Where did it come from? You can tell me. Anyway, so today we have both straight the normal broad funds, so also the more narrow funds. And why do we have that? It's because basically some customers want it. Right? It's also a debate about what is Article 9, how do we define it? It's only sustainable investments. And we can talk more about that. It's been a big debate among the asset managers whether it's too difficult to define it. It started as a reporting, but it ended up like a category. And you have to go back to what is the reason with the ESG is actually to maybe to channel money to get some change. I think we should come back to that, whether this is actually changing anything or not, because that's a big question mark. We should also go back to what the industry has been doing. They've been saying that it's very difficult with Article 9. Some years ago, they had called all their funds green. This is extremely green. It's not only green, you get a high return, and it's also very, very good. You do something good for the world. And it didn't really work out that way. You know, it was good for the manager because the costs were very high. So there are some problems here that we should discuss, and we should actually see whether this is what happens to the return. Is it actually good for return? And what more needs to be done to really drive that change?
It's quite interesting because when I first started looking at this 10 years ago or something, we had a discussion in the industry about fiduciary duties and whether investing, if you could invest green or in ESG products, or if you were then violating your fiduciary duties to take care of your clients and customers. And then I think we spent quite a lot of time and resources on trying to prove that investing green at least did not diminish your returns. And then for a while, I think the idea was that you would actually get better returns, as you say, by investing green. But I remember when I worked here in 2010 to 14, we had Sven Giegold from the Greens in the European Parliament, and some way well know him and recall his fantastic posters and descriptions of the machinery here. And even though he was, or perhaps because he was a Green member of Parliament, I think he was always kind of on top of his briefs. But he also already then said that green does not mean risk-free. And I think that is still true. And I think we will come back in the next round to topics like greenwashing and what effects do you actually have, etc. Right? I'll first take you, Mette. How about you have kind of at Jyske Bank, you look at kind of sustainability from several different angles, I would assume. Please, what is on your plate and on your mind these days?
Yeah, thank you. Well, at Jyske Bank, we are both advising, so we have the advisor role. So to dive a bit into that, I think the really central piece of the sustainable finance would be the MiFID rules and covering the sustainability preferences. And to your question, like where are we on that? I think we have learned a lot. It's been challenging in terms of asking retail investors about their minimum preferences to the taxonomy in terms of sustainable investments you talked about as well, and these PI indicators. And I think there is still a lot of debate on how exactly the rules should be interpreted, but we interpreted that we should ask at least 2 PI indicators. So where we are at is we asked about taxonomy, the sustainable investment, about their attitude towards fossil fuels. Is that something they want to exclude or not? And in terms of CO2 intensity, carbon footprints, if that's something they want to take into account. And the experience is, I think that it's been really good. Like you said, we have the right pieces. It's a really important area to get the retail investors to, besides risk, also take sustainable preferences into account. So I think we got on the right piece, but the piece is just way too complicated. It's really difficult to have a dialogue with normal Danes or normal retail investors about percentages about taxonomy. So yeah, I think that's where we're at on the MiFID. We got started, but we need, I think, in the next phase of this regulation we found the right pieces, but now we have to moderate it, take the next step, make it more easy for retail investors. And then I think the really complicated thing is that sustainability is really complicated. We don't have just two easy indicators and we can just use them. So what to do? So in terms of the E and the S and the G that you're asking, so at the moment we're asking mostly about the E to retail investors, 4 indicators, and we would really like to also to have the S and the G and also biodiversity. So we would like to bring in a lot more indicators and how to do that at the same time of not making it even more complicated than it already is. So I think we need to look into some kind of label framework in the disclosure regulation, as you said, Articles 6 and 8 and 9. How can we use these all this complexity behind, but then in terms of showing the retail investors a more easy method, label, or scale. I think that should be some of the really important next steps to look at.
Yes, and Florence, I know, I mean, coming back to what Annemie said about the cart before the horse, and I think that is really, I mean, representing issuers. I know that, I mean, one kind of call all the time from the financial services industry has, of course, been that we lack the data. And I mean, you need a whole kind of ecosystem around ESG with advisors, with, you know, accountants and advisors and corporates who understand, hopefully, the rules. And as Annemie said, I mean, now, hopefully, I mean, we're getting somewhere when it comes to kind of international standards. But please, I mean, I know that you have spent an enormous amount of time on this. So please, what's your take on this? And please also say a few words about European issues.
Yes, thank you, Urban. Yes, I think we spent a lot of time and it's not the end. So I can assure you about that. Yes, first, thank you for being here and present the views of European issuers. European issuers represent trade association of listed issuers, but also companies that access the capital markets. And in order to finance the transitions, you need to continue to have companies on the capital markets, and also you need to have sustainable projects. So that's a little bit to give you the framework. We work also on the listing requirements, and we work also on the corporate governance requirements and the relation between the shareholders and the issuers in the context of the Shareholder Rights Directive. The offices are here in Brussels, as you just mentioned, and we are happy to share the office with the French and the Italian association. Now, coming to the sustainability agenda, what does it mean for issuers? It's challenge and opportunities. I mean, there is a sustainable finance framework. We heard about it, the CSRD, now the ESRS. That's good because you have now a framework that is in place. We start first with the large corporates, the ones that are already disclosing under NFRD. And that will have to report about the alignment as well on the activities towards the EU taxonomy. And then the intention is to report to different users, different stakeholders, not only the investors, but and different users. It makes sense in the context of the development, but also they need to connect the information in order to fulfill the needs of the investors with this SFDR. When it comes to the information also, companies need to take into consideration the reporting alongside the digital tagging of the information to the single electronic reporting format. Then we need to go to assurance, starting first with limited and then reasonable assurance and encompass the E, S, and the G. Now, some of the key aspects and the big change compared to associated reporting is the aspect of double materiality, talking about financial impact, risk, and opportunities, but also, I mean, the fact that the information will be disclosed through the management report provided and also refer to other information if they have the same assurance and fulfill necessary digital requirements. When it comes to the value chain, only material information in the value chain, upstream and downstream, will have to be reported. And if the information is lacking, then they have to demonstrate that they have done reasonable effort to provide the necessary data. It's important also to note, and it was mentioned also by Anami, that there has been a lot of efforts and we contributed, and we are very happy about the developments on the interoperability in order to avoid that corporates have to report twice and according to different standards. So alignment there is work in progress. There will be also, EFRAG is working on providing some tables in order to demonstrate, the level of interoperability, and we are very pleased. Why do I mention all this information? Because you might know already or maybe not, but it's just to give you, the example of the complexity also that lies, on the shoulder of the companies actually. For large listed companies that were already reporting according to the NFRD and CSRD, it's a lot of efforts, but they are quite confident on the ability to manage those efforts. They see the relevance, and they have not started today the journey. They are involving also the board support. You mentioned the G. I mean, this comes also to, it's a direction, it's strategic, so it needs to be addressed at the board level. They also initiate double materiality assessment, they do formulate plans in order to bridge gaps, and they establish also some control. But nevertheless, even those ones, and the ones that are more innovative, they have a lot of challenge in terms of understanding the coherence between the different pieces of legislation. And this is something we can come back a little bit later, because it requires a lot of effort and it's very demanding and also very costly to a certain extent. Then what about the smaller ones? The smaller ones, first they need to understand what they have to do and when they will have to do it, and I can tell you it's not always the case for the moment, so they are less familiar. They are a little bit uncertain on how to start and how to initiate the progress, and they really need guidance in this context. So we are happy to, to see a set of guidance. There will be guidance issued by EFRAG on materiality and value chain assessment. There will be modules with the voluntary SME standard in order to fulfill the needs of companies that are not listed. Nevertheless, for the moment, what we observe in the discussions with the LSME standard is the requirements are still very high compared, to the voluntary standards, and the number of data points still very important. Another aspect that we are a little bit worried about it also, where do you, and I was discussing this before we started, is the limitation on the value chain. I mean, for the moment, we don't see, you have this materiality assessment, which is at the core for certain disclosure of the companies. Then you have the question about the value chain. Where do you, end up? And I think also that another point also, which is a little bit complex to capture probably, is this stakeholder engagement. Here we are talking about, the investors' needs. We talk about MiFID, SFDR, but it goes a little bit beyond, because it goes also to this area. So, and I will finish by saying that the governance standard, from our perspective, I mean, we see it's the core, it's a discipline, it's already there. So it's not really a major challenge, but sustainability is really touching the soul of the corporate, so they are taking this into consideration. When it comes to the social aspects, it has also an international dimension. When you look at the value chain, and there are many examples, I mean, we are not going to discuss this for the moment, but it's not so easy. So today, ultimately, what is important, and it was mentioned, is the interpretation aspect of the concept, of the methodologies, understanding, and speak the same language. And I will stop here for the moment. Thank you.
Well, Håvard, I think this is, of course, for you as an asset manager, a piece of cake, right?
Yeah, it's not a piece of cake, but we do. We think it's good that transparency improves, because we want to see what's inside the companies, and we do get much better reporting, much better numbers on all of the E, S, and G, and that has improved a lot. So it helps a bit, and I think everything that is going on from the EU side it didn't really start there. It started from the customer side, as I said. So this is not kind of new to us, but then again, I think it's very important to ask why we do this. So we do it because we want to find out how is the company for the customer. What do you want to invest in as a customer? So that's one thing which is very, very important. that I'm stressing, and the next thing is to drive some kind of change, and that is very important for the EU, for instance, but also for us as a manager, and those two things. The first one is maybe easier because it's now you can put together a portfolio which is better than than the whole market, and maybe you can tell your customers that yeah, you don't get coal, you don't get the cluster bumps here, you don't get, you know, does it suit you? Yes, it suits me. Okay, fine. The other thing is that how is this driving change? I think ownership from a big manager do drive change in some instances. We have seen that on the micro level. We can change the companies, but on the other side, shrinking your universe doesn't necessarily drive the change that we need. Yes, it will lead to focus on the area. It might lead to more capital into some sectors, but it doesn't necessarily drive the change to Paris, to call it that, or to take away some of the other issues that we doesn't want. So I think there's quite a lot to do on to see the mechanism from where we are now, which is explained, to how to drive the change. And reporting and categorizing is not sufficient.
No, and I think I understand that when it comes to reporting, corporates spend lots of time and effort and resources on this. I know also from the accounting side, in the Big Four, I met someone who's responsible for ESG reporting in one of the Big Fours, said that, until quite recently, that section of the reporting was more considered or seen as marketing or, advertisements for the company. Of course, things will change a lot when the managers and the understands, or they know now that when they sign off on the ESG part of the report, if they lie, and we will come back to that soon about greenwashing, etc. If they lie about or exaggerate their excellence in this field, of course it will be the same as if they say something that is not true about their profits or costs. But this kind of complexity, and you touch upon that with your clients, etc. How do you approach that? How do you kind of explain that to your clients? And do you share this view that it's getting better at least?
Yeah, I do share that view, and I do share the view that if we saw maybe 3 years ago, it was very much marketing, and in terms of if we should go to the lending side, like having dialogues with a lending client for a bank in terms of sustainability, like today or later on, if you looked into sustainability report, it just all looks good, right? So it's really difficult, like as a bank, or to move the transition as you're talking about. Forward, we should be better at rewarding the ones that are doing the best job, but that's really difficult to see because it all sounds really good at the moment, but it is getting better. And I think that CSRD and the big work you're talking about would be a game changer in that area, because now we're not, or after CSRD in 2024, the reports would not only be the marketing story, it would also be like, do you have this policy? Yes or no. You'll also have to report, no, I don't have it, instead of only telling all the good things. So I guess that will be a huge step. In terms of wishes for the next step, from my side is I think maybe it will also be a bit overwhelming with all this data. There's a lot of new information in CSRD. I think there are more than 15 policies and a lot of information for investors. So I think we also need to work on, it could be in sector work, it could also be in the regulation, but we need more measures to what to do with all this information. Like if we have, some companies have out of 10 policies, they have 6, another have another 6, like which one is the one to reward? So I think we need a lot of methodologies, how to analyze all this data, how to, who to reward and who to push forward.
And Annemie, I think this is, I recall, I mean, like again 10 years ago, I had discussions both with DG Environment here in Brussels, who were used to kind of the COP negotiations, and they were used, of course, to these things taking ages, or at least years. And then I left that building and moved over to DG FISMA, and they wanted everything, you know, from start to finish, not more than 18 months. And this is, as you also said, I mean, you know, some of these regulations, I mean, some of them are even being reviewed now, and they do not, all of the puzzles do not always, you know, fit together. I don't think Lego would have been impressed with kind of how it works, but we will get there, I think, at some stage. Could you say something? I mean, as a supervisor, I mean, there are so many bits and pieces. I mean, the corporates and, of course, the financial sector participants, they struggle with this, but I think they take lots of help. But, I mean, you also have this kind of web of different regulations. And in addition, this is more about, you know, environmental information, etc., which is slightly different from the kind of financial information that you have in the past had to deal with. I mean, how do you cope with that? And just to say where you are on that now, and then we will move on to the S and the G, please.
Yeah, thank you. How do we cope with that? In the same way I think issuers do and asset managers do, by trying to build capacity and trying to hire the right people. Huh? And that is ongoing. We have at the FSMA right now about 12 people busy with ESG. 12, you can say it's not a lot. For the FSMA, it's a lot. We are 350, so 12, that's okay. Of which data analysts, of which also engineers. Yeah? We have no choice. We should. Huh? And just as 15 years ago we set up a knowledge center for IFRSs, we will set up a knowledge center for ESRSs, huh? And we are busy doing so. That's the way we cope. I would like to say different things with regard to what has been said, and talking about opportunities and challenges as a supervisor. But one opportunity I see is exactly what you said, Harvard. That is that when the data will be there, it will still take some time for them to be completely reliable, but that is a huge opportunity for asset managers to drive change. I think your story, what you tell, is wonderful. That is really stewardship towards companies. I agree, reporting is not enough, but it's the start. You can't do without. Huh? And if the big asset managers really use it, try to have their analysts in place and analyze themselves, I think that is a huge catalyst potentially. Huh? But, well, as far as the supervisor's agenda is concerned, of course, it's difficult not to talk about greenwashing. So greenwashing has been top of agenda from the start. And we should recall greenwashing is not necessarily an intentional process. It is not necessarily intentional. I think it's not taboo anymore to say that greenwashing, that the complexity of the regulatory framework is a source of potential greenwashing too. Interesting to read are the progress reports of the three agencies, EBA, ESMA, EIOPA, on greenwashing. They contain lots of examples of potential greenwashing, be it intentional or not. The first risk of greenwashing stems, of course, from data at issuers level, at corporates level. The quality of data, that's top of agenda. We should all enhance the quality of the data at issuers level. And there we did at FSMA a first screening of the taxonomy reporting over financial year 2022. We looked at the KPIs, at CAPEX, OPEX and turnover. We looked at the fact if companies use the right templates. And we looked at the coherence between the denominators of the KPIs and the financial statements. And okay, so I'm confident. We did not look at the way the technical screening criteria were used yet, but as far as this is concerned, this is promising. So of course, at issuers level, that's the first risk of greenwashing, non-intentional greenwashing. And the second example of combating greenwashing at supervisory level is the action taken by ESMA with regard to funds naming. Because, of course, the name of a fund is ridiculous, but the name of a fund can be misleading. And there was nothing in the regulation about fund naming. We could only use the classical concepts like misleading information, but that's very difficult to enforce. So there ESMA used national language processing to go through prospectuses of unit-linked products, and they realized that in the last 10 years the use of ESG words has increased enormously. But some funds may be sailing under a false flag. So that's interesting work, and it shows what has been done, and the reflection on funds naming will go on. And the third example I would like to give of efforts to combat greenwashing is the audit of portfolios of unit-linked products. And that is something that you might consider that's common sense, of course. Regulators, supervisors should audit portfolios, but no. I mean, SFDR is a disclosure regulation. We should look at the compatibility of investment strategies with the definitions of SFDR. We do not traditionally look whether in the portfolio there are investments that are not compatible with SFDR. There are as much investment strategies as there are fund compartments. So this is a really difficult exercise, but expectations are so high that national supervisors are engaging in data analytics in order to try to detect potential non-eligible investments in portfolios. So we're really working hard on that. We didn't even have the data. I mean, funds do not have to report real time the composition of their portfolios. So we buy the data from data providers. Yeah, that's the way it works. But so that is top of agenda, and that will remain top of agenda in the foreseeable future. A second big challenge at supervisory level, as far as I'm concerned, is convergence, supervisory convergence. In the period of time before the European Commission took rightly so the view that Article 9 funds should be invested at 100% in sustainable investments, we had different views, national, we didn't know. Was it 80%, 60%, 100%? And there were differences. That's, of course, inadmissible. Yeah? Convergence is key. And then what I always used to say is that it can be done, but it takes time. IFRSs have been introduced so many years ago. And at ESMA level, we have the European Enforcers Coordination Session. It has changed names, but it was the EECS. And that was the IFRS specialists, and that works. I mean, if you want an opinion from that panel, from the ECS, you file a case, and within 2 days, 3 days, you've got an opinion. They have a database where that is freely, publicly available with positions on application and interpretation of IFRSs. And ESMA is trying to do the same with regard to non-financial information. So that can work. It can work, but it takes time. So convergence is really a key issue where, if you say issuers, that is going to cost lots of energy, but it's the only way. And then the last challenge I would like to refer to at, not really at supervisory level, but at regulatory level, is what you said, Mette. It's the whole objective of the regulatory framework is to channel investments, as you say, and there's to give investors instruments to put pressure on companies. And that pressure should come also from retail investors because they're interested. We see in Belgium the net inflows in Article 9 funds continue to increase. So there is an interest, but it's too complex. And you cannot explain to a retail investor that a sustainable investment, according to SFDR, it's up to the asset manager to define what is investment strategies, and there is no alignment with the taxonomy. And this is about simplification, but it's not peculiar to the sustainable investment framework. It's a discussion that you can have also with regard to prospectuses. Simplify, and you see efforts for simplification, key ID, key IIS, summaries of prospectuses, but at one point in time you reach the limits for simplification. And that is, you cannot simplify complex information, and that is where labels kick in. And there I think I personally strongly believe in a labeling system with the labels being supervised at EU level, the conditions to have the label for the investors to have comparable, to have anchor points of comparability. That is, I think, key. But that is on the table right now, so let's hope we can move in that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, Florence, when it comes to the issuers, I mean, as said, I mean, it's complex. You spend a lot of time, as you've said, on this. How do you see kind of the future now with the S and the G, and you know, going forward? What are the discussions that you have with your members?
Yes, first allow me to say that I share to a certain extent some of the comments with Annemie. Nevertheless, I mean, pressure on issuers, I'm not sure is the right angle. And I would say why, because you need to continue to have projects, you need to have this capacity to build innovative techniques, and there are a lot of examples that we see, even within some industries, to join efforts to create consortium in order to move forward and to, fulfill the expectation of the investors. Now, it's different when it comes to, of course, the regulatory agenda, because sustainability is really complex. I mean, it's much more complex than financial reporting, which is only about figures. I mean, you just mentioned it. You will have different metrics, and you will need to assess, and not all the methodologies, for instance, on the S, on the G, but also even on the E, are completely finalized. So this is, another aspect that where we need adaptation. We need to enable this continuous learning process, and you mentioned greenwashing unintentionally. The challenge is that legislation have been done maybe in the reverse order. First, putting pressure on the investors, and then putting pressures on the companies, and now the companies on their suppliers, and then they have to do it, worldwide. It needs time. They are progressing. A lot of companies are now gathering a lot of data. But the processes have to be put in place, and I think for the moment what is really important is to clarify and align the framework, the sustainable framework. It will really help to navigate with a common language, whether it's ESRS but also SFDR. When we discuss some of the concepts, and we are currently, answering the consultation, there are many concepts actually that you don't find, in one or the other. Like, for instance, materiality, principal adverse impact, also the activity sustainable under taxonomy, and whether under SFDR are, really aligned in the pieces of legislation. There is a clear mismatch here that doesn't, I think, support, I would say, all of us here around the table. So probably, I would say, in terms of future actions, this is something where it would probably, clarify and help the corporates as well to navigate and move in a more certain environment when it comes to the reporting of all this information.
Good, thank you. Well, Håvard, I mean, it's quite nice, I mean, to work in the financial sector where they actually see us as part of the solution and not as part of the problem, as it was, after the financial crisis. And how about you? I mean, your comments to what has been said, and also, I mean, about the S and the G kind of moving forward.
Yeah, I think there's a, on the reporting, definitions, ambiguity, there's a lot of it, and it's difficult, but it's doable, It's doable, and we've done that for a long time. But I think one of the main problems is kind of driving the change. On the SNG, it's hard to drive a change, but to define this, it's not that hard. I mean, we agree about what is really bad. slavery is not good, you know. It's pretty. It's much easier to define some areas on the S and the G, but at the same time, it's not that easy to drive that change on a global basis in China, in other in Qatar, in you know, Saudi Arabia. So it's not that easy to drive the change. When it comes to the E, if you go back to the E, we know how to get to Paris, to put it that way, you know, because you're going from way out to zero emissions. But at the same time, we need those brown companies on the way to Paris, you know. So it's not that easy to tell established industry to stop their emissions, because we need those industries on the way to Paris in 2050. So and it's not necessarily very useful to shift your assets away from the brown companies to the green companies, because it doesn't really drive that change. So one of my big things that we need is just mechanism to drive that change, because capital isn't driving that change alone. It helps, you know. It creates some bubbles in the renewable sometimes, but it doesn't really drive that change all alone. So we need something else, because it's the capital. If I take my portfolio, I have 2,000 companies in the global portfolio, 200 companies in the Article 9 portfolio, and we take a few billions from one portfolio to the other one. Nothing happens. You know, we do it in 10 seconds. It's just a trade in the market. It doesn't really drive a change. So to drive a change, we need some other mechanisms as well. We need incentives. We need prices. And we also need regulations, not regulations for the financial industry, but for the real economy, to drive that change. So we need some regulation to reduce the activity that we don't need. So,
So Mette, I mean, would you agree with Howard? And I mean, if we also look at the S and the G going forward, it's quite complex. But I mean, there are rules possibly coming in that area as well, of course.
Yeah, I think what I agree on very much is that we really need the transition. We need more focus on that. If we look at CSRD and the indicators, we will get there. It's a lot of figures about today, like what is the CO2, what is the water emission, how is the pollution. I think what we need going forward in terms of like one way of driving the transition is methodologies like, for instance, the science-based target, where you as a financial institution can say that in 2040 all my investments or all my lending will be to other companies being in science-based target. Then you're not just talking about today, you're sending a signal on where to be in the future. I think in my opinion, it doesn't have to be exactly the science-based target methodology, but I like that it's forward-looking, and that I think in terms of our lending clients, I think what they would really like for us is to be better at saying, what do you want from us 3 years from now? Like, so that's really powerful, because if we were just saying, okay, policy on deforestation, we would like you to have that. If you don't have that, then we think it's bad, or you get a point in like the incentives you're talking about in rates or in other terms of products in our bank. But what could be really powerful is telling the way forward, because we don't really want to lose any clients. Of course we live off our clients. So if we can move the transition forward by saying, in 3 years' time we expect you to be here or here. Like we need better measures in terms of saying, when have we done enough? And I think, as you said, in terms of we know the way to Paris, so in terms of climate, we have better science-based target. We have some methodology that kind of tells us now you're on the right path and in the right direction, and you're having the right pace. But in terms of the S and the G, to get back to your question, I think we still lack a lot. Like To be a bit more concrete, what we would work on is when we have lending clients and we have sustainability-linked loans, then some S measure could be a supplier code of conduct, and then they will increase their supplier code of conduct in the next 3 years to maybe 100%. But what to put in those supplier code of conduct is still, I find really difficult. Like, when is a supplier code of conduct ambitious is still difficult. I mean, it's, yeah. Of course, we can also learn a lot in the financial sector, but in terms of working with customers in textile or in shipping, it's a lot to get experts on. Like, so when is something ambitious and when is it not? It would be really good to have methods to look to to find inspiration.
Absolutely. And let me say now, we're getting towards the end, but we do have time for a question if someone has one. I think we have a microphone here if anyone has a question. Otherwise, I have one. Well, then I will ask my question. I mean, we're getting closer to Christmas, and here in Belgium, of course, I mean, we're kind of, you're celebrating a bit earlier as well in December, at least to some extent. Not Christmas, perhaps, but you have, I did when I lived here, we put the shoes outside with the carrots in and all of that, right? I mean, we have a panel coming up on the CMU, and as said, I mean, in the beginning, we're coming towards the end of the Sustainable Finance Action Plan. We do have a representative of the Commission here, and they have promised, of course, to take note of what our ideas and thoughts about what could be in the next Sustainable Finance Action Plan. So if you would like to wish something to be in the next Sustainable Finance Action Plan, a particular measure or some line of thinking, and that we can also, I think it's important to, as we talked about the transition, it's really important to recognize the link between sustainable finance and the capital markets union, because the transition has to be financed to a large extent by capital markets. So Mette, what is your wish? What would you like to see from Santa Claus or from the Commission in the next Sustainable Finance Action Plan?
That's a really good question. I think my favorite Christmas present in that area would be some kind of a labeling system in terms of connecting the dots. We're using the taxonomy, using some of the important KPIs from the CSRD, so connecting the dots and putting that into some label regime in Articles 6, 8, and 9, and also with some advice on what naming you can use in the different label categories. I think that will solve a lot of greenwashing and the complexity for the retail investors. So that would be my biggest wish, and to put in a lot of transition figures, the science-based target methodology, and also we haven't talked about active ownership, but if we could be better, instead of just saying an asset manager does active ownership, almost everyone does, but are they doing a lot or very lot, or like so some kind of measures just to graduate active ownership would also be really on my wishing list.
That was a great wish. That was a great wish. Howard?
Yeah, I'm kind of finished with the labeling because that's most of the job is done there. So just do the small things. I need some policy to build on the things that they've done on the financial sector now. So you need incentives, prices on pollution, and regulations on values so that all companies adjust. And we have to make it profitable.
Super. We can tell that you are used to asking for lots of presents from Santa Claus, but that's good.
Well, we got a lot already from the regulators. Now we need something more on the numbers. Yeah.
That's super. Florence.
Yes, as you correctly said, in Belgium we do wish lists. I'm not going to give you all the wish lists because it's very long, so I'm only to concentrate on one of the aspects, which is sustainability. We want to leave time to focus on efficient implementation and practical solutions. And also the other aspect is that companies, they do not operate in in isolation. They operate in an international environment, and it's very important that this is taken into consideration. Also to take into consideration that the speed of implementation is very fast compared to the speed of development of the business to cope with it. It's not the same piece sometimes. And also the level of detail, we talk about that sometimes it's too much, because we wonder whether this is the right calibration, you know, to answer the needs that are expected from the market participants.
Thank you so much. And Annemie, you get the final wish here.
I think I'm going to fight with Jette for that gift, I mean, the labeling, because I think it's an important one also to make the link with CMU to really attract retail investments also. But then I would be very happy if someone could give me supervisory powers with regard to the G and corporate culture. We didn't talk about that, but there is a definition of corporate culture in CSRD, but honestly, I cannot do anything with that. So standards as far as corporate culture is concerned and supervision, we know the E comes first, environment first, but environment not only. So I hope we can make some progress also as far as corporate culture is concerned. We're in a Scandinavian forum. You're one step ahead of 10 steps ahead as far as corporate culture, but in my country, that is an issue that I would like to see addressed. Really.
Thank you so much to all of you. It's been really inspiring to listen to you. We do have challenges, but I think there is absolutely a road ahead as well. And what we all need is, of course, sustainable finance rules and frameworks. Thank you so much. Let's give them all a big hand.